versus LeBron. Sound to you.
Double to go. What a play. Kyrie Irving rattles one home. Harden with the three. Oh, LeBron. Who in their right mind is going to get in front of that? Harris, tough shot. Got it.
Which is showing why he's one of the best shooters that we have on display.
The Nets win their 5th consecutive game.
I don't think, you don't look at too many games during the season when you have a measuring stick, but also when you do, you want to be full, and they weren't full as well. So you don't really know how to go about that. But, you can always find ways to get better no matter who's in the lineup.
So we'll see them down the line again, and we look forward to it with a whole entire healthy Lakers team. That's what we really wanted. I know everybody wants that. And so I'm looking forward to the challenge and seeing them down the line.
Brooklyn, stand up. You all see Kyrie, he even pulled the mask down because he had to make sure we all heard that message. Stephen A., Max, I'm Molly. Good morning, everybody. Welcome into Feel Good Friday here on First Take. Fellas, I'm into all of this. I mean, I know we didn't get to see both teams at full strength, but that was still something special, and we will at some point. You heard Kyrie, Brooklyn extending their win streak now to 5. Stephen A., what message did Mr. Irving send?
Well, first of all, Kyrie Irving, I mean, he had moments. He didn't have a big game statistically, but he had moments where he put on the show. He just showed you just the kind of ability that we all know that he has. The kid is spectacular. There's no way around that. Yes, they did not have Kevin Durant, and the Los Angeles Lakers did not have Anthony Davis. But watching this game, the message that I peeled from it is that, as I said before, the Brooklyn Nets are coming out of the Eastern Conference. They will be in the NBA Finals, barring any significant injuries. And as far as I'm concerned, last night said to me that they should be the championship favorites. The Brooklyn Nets should be the favorites to win the world championship. The questionable health of Anthony Davis, combined with the way the offense is playing, the fluidity, the distribution of the basketball, the Joe Harrises of the world in the starting lineup, the Jeff Green, how you could go small the way Brooklyn did last night. Bruce Brown, along with Joe Harris, along with Kyrie and James Harden, with Jeff Green playing the center spot. You got 4 or 5 guys on the floor that are all a threat from 3-point range. They went relatively small, and they definitely had an advantage over the Los Angeles Lakers in the first quarter because LeBron obviously only had 7 points in the first quarter, couldn't really get it going. You expected him to attack from the interior all night long. He did it enough, but in the same breath, he was still struggling from 3-point range, which was predictable. In the end, I'm just looking at the Brooklyn Nets right now and the way they're getting others involved, the Joe Harrises, the Jeff Greens of the world, the Landry Shamits of the world, and what they can do from the perimeter, and the fact that these guys are literally feeding the basketball. You see the effect that Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni, the offensive minds that they have, coming into play here. And by the way, they get defensive stops at times when they need them as well. So I look at all of that, and I'm willing to declare here today that the Brooklyn Nets should be the favorites to win the chip. They should be the favorites to win it all. That's where I'm at right now. That's what I peeled from last night.
The message that Kyrie and Harden sent to LeBron last night was real, recognize real. Game, recognize game. And when Kyrie, remember back, Stephen A., when Kyrie made the comments about KD and how for the first time at the end of a game, he sees another dude who, he wasn't lying. What he's showing is he wasn't lying. I think he ignored LeBron's judgment. I'd still rather have the ball in LeBron's hands with everything he can do with the ball, including score. But what Kyrie was talking about is a guy he trusts in that moment to hit a shot from anywhere, just like he can. Harden, too. James Harden has played with some great players. He was too young to know how to be great with other great players when he was first in OKC. That's why he and Westbrook couldn't share the floor. That's why he used him as a sixth man. And he wasn't very good there either when the pressure mounted. And later in Houston, when he got Chris Paul, let's not forget, by the time the playoffs rolled around, Chris Paul was probably off a step, probably missed it because of injuries. It made him look like he was declining. And Westbrook is not a shooter to begin with. This is the first time James Harden and Kyrie Irving are playing. Last night it was with one other guy, but when KD is healthy, it's 2 other guys who are just like them that way, who they trust to hit a big shot from anywhere on the court at any given time, especially when it matters. And you saw it. You brought up Kyrie Irving. The numbers don't tell the story from Kyrie's game yesterday. Yes, we showed some highlights. He hit some very tough shots late, but we know his skill level. He can do that. But it was Kyrie's willingness to move the ball. Not just the assist, but the hockey assist, the assist that led to the assist, the pass that led to the assist. The way they moved the ball unselfishly, James Harden too, his court vision. I knew James Harden could pass, but oh my God, the court vision he's shown since he's come to the Nets. It's the same sort of thing. These guys see game, recognize game. That dude's just like me. Can get his own shot at any time as well as anyone who ever lived, and can hit it from anywhere as well as anyone who ever lived. You went through the Nets roster, Stephen A. What about TLC in the corner, right? Their guys are wide open because of these players' gravity and their unselfish play. And the message they sent to LeBron, of course, is we're coming, but it's because game, recognize game. They're playing unselfish basketball.
Well, I just disagree with you. I think that's engagement and hyperbole, and it's unnecessary because the fact of the matter is that LeBron James, who doesn't know that James Harden has game? Who doesn't know that Kyrie Irving has game? LeBron knows it because Kyrie helped to win the championship. So to me, that's nothing new. What's new to me is the players that are making a contribution. The level of unselfishness, Kyrie Irving and James Harden definitely needs to be given a lot of credit. And then we need to engage in a little history here. When James Harden was in Oklahoma City, although he was relatively young, you had people who believed that he was a better point guard than Russell Westbrook. Not a better overall talent because we didn't see the scoring machine that James Harden would ultimately become in Houston, but they actually thought that he was a better point guard, that he made better decisions at the point guard spot, even when he was young and in Oklahoma City coming off the bench for the Thunder. So we understand that James Harden, it's not a surprise that he has that court vision. It's not a surprise that he has those point guard skills. The surprise was what he became offensively once he arrived in Houston as the number one option. In the case of Kyrie Irving, the level of unselfishness has to be applauded, but also it comes down to what these brothers are doing. TLC's making shots. Joe Harris hit 6 or 7 threes last night. Landry Shamet, he hit 2 or 3 threes. They are threats from the perimeter. You can put the Brooklyn Nets can actually go 8 or 9 deep. It's not just about the big three. They can go 8 or 9 deep because you got guys that can shoot, and at all times they can put one, in most situations, 2 guys on the floor, but you have to guard to free up those shooters. Brooklyn's the favorite right now. They're the favorites right now.
I don't think they're the favorite yet. They have to show that they can play defense. Although they've also showed you're going to have to outscore them. The Lakers are going to have to score 120, 130 points a game. There are teams in the NBA right now better than them because they play defense, including the Lakers and the Jets. But what they did show is the Lakers are going to have to figure out where that 120, 130 is going to come from. Mm-hmm. But let me be very clear, Stephen A. The message they sent to LeBron is not we have game. Like LeBron knows that. It's that game, recognize game. That this is not the same old Kyrie. This is not the same old Harden we've seen in the past. We know Harden can play point guard, but a lot of times it was same thing with Kyrie. Dribble. When they can't find their own shot, they get it to a teammate. But that's because they've never played with another dude like them. And now they're playing with 2 others. And the question's not Durant. We know Durant's impossible. We know that. The question was, how are these 2 going to coexist in the same backcourt? And what they've shown is, because game recognized game, they are willing to do what it takes to play unselfishly, to sacrifice touches, to sacrifice shots, to give up responsibility because they trust their teammate in a way they never have. That's the message.
Max, Kyrie looks the same as he looked in Cleveland. LeBron was handling the ball. Kyrie was off the ball. Kyrie was a scoring machine. Kyrie was a scoring machine, putting up buckets big time, but deferred to some degree to LeBron James and what LeBron James and Ty Lue wanted to do. Now, James Harden's a little bit different, but Kyrie Irving is doing what he did in Cleveland. He didn't do it in Boston, but he did do it in Cleveland when they won a chip.
To an extent, because he was a young guy on the way up who'd never won before, and he was playing with a player who people are arguing is the greatest of all time. And even then, we're starting to talk about, is he rival after the win against the Warriors at Oracle in 2016? Is he rivaling Michael Jordan? That's when Kyrie played with him as a young player. That's entirely different. Then, forcing his way out of town, not really being able to get along with others on the court in Boston because he played with good players but not great ones. and now showing up at this point and sharing a backcourt with Harden. That's a different story.
You're wrong. The only difference between Kyrie now and Kyrie then is that Kyrie did it begrudgingly in Cleveland. Now he's happy because he's with a teammate he wants to team with in Kevin Durant and James Harden. He didn't want to be there with LeBron. He wants to be here in Brooklyn with Kyrie, with KD and Harden. That's the only difference. But the game is similar.
All right, I'll wrap it up by saying this. The Nets are 10-1 currently against such record in NBA, so they're certainly playing up to the competition. Fellas, let's get to the breaking news we had yesterday because we didn't really get to dive into it. It was towards the end of the show, and you know what that is. It was Carson Wentz. So here's the deal. The Eagles have agreed to trade him to the Colts for a 2021 third-round pick, a conditional 2022 second-round pick that could turn into a first. That according to Chris Mortensen and Adam Schefter. Max? I know you and Carson Wentz have a special relationship, so tell me this. Do you think the Eagles are the losers in this deal?
I can't believe that's a question. Of course they're the winners here. Or they're certainly a winner here. The Eagles took a contract.
Wait, I said are the Eagles the losers?
No, they're the winners. They're the winners. They're not the losers. They're the winners. Okay. They had a contract that looked immovable to me. They had a guy who I pointed out, They had a guy who I pointed out through the second half of 2019 was regressing shockingly. And then we saw it continue in 2020 to the point where he became the worst starter at the position in football. He was the worst quarterback in the NFL, the worst starting quarterback. And then, you know what happens to the worst starting quarterback in the NFL? They lose their job. He was so bad, he was the worst starter, and then he wasn't a starter anymore. That's how bad he was. And they have that contract, his guy in his fifth year, who was so bad that he lost his job. And that guy has an elite contract. He has the contract of a top 5 quarterback. He has the contract of a guy who's not only supposed to not make as many mistakes as he did, not be the worst guy in the league, not lose his job. He has the contract of a guy who's so good he's supposed to make up for other deficiencies on your team. That's why you're able to pay him that money. That's the, Donovan McNabb type thing, Stephen A., in Philadelphia. And when that guy is the worst starter in the league and loses his job, how do you even move that deal? They moved the deal and got a third-round pick this season. I want to point out, they couldn't even get a second-round pick this season. But they did get a third, and they have a conditional second-round pick where if Wentz doesn't lose his job in Indianapolis, they're going to wind up with a first. Of course they didn't lose the deal, Stephen A. They took a guy who's going to take this player and got a third and a second, potentially a first. That's a win.
I think you're completely wrong about this on several fronts. Number one, we don't know how good the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be because Jalen Hurts only completed 52% of his passes, and we don't know what kind of quarterback he's going to be. He wasn't lights out. He was 1-3 as a starter. He certainly showed potential. He certainly had big plays. Obviously, he's got wheels. He can move without the ball. He can run the football, and as a result, he galvanized the troops to some degree. But in the end, we don't know what the hell the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be, which is something we'll get into later. But let's look at the Indianapolis Colts. They were a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. They lose a quarterback in Phil Rivers that threw for over 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, but he was a relatively stationary target, very immobile. He wasn't a threat to run the football against anybody. Got rid of the ball relatively quickly. We'll give him credit for that. But basically, he was on the tail end of his career, which is proof because he just retired. Having said all of that, what do you have? You have a running game led by Jonathan Taylor, who's a 1,000-yard rusher. You've got guys like T.Y. Hilton and Pittman Jr. and others that are good receivers. You have an offensive line that is considered elite. Even in a down year based on injuries, they were still a top 7 offensive line in the game. And Carson Wentz is coming from a team where he was sacked 50 times, a team that surrendered 65 sacks. That is the Philadelphia Eagles, albeit to some degree it was his fault because he held on to the ball too damn long. But clearly, anybody will tell you that the Eagles' offensive line was highly suspect, which is something even you pointed out before. They gave up 65 sacks last year, 50 at the hands of Carson Wentz. And he is going to a team that surrendered 19 sacks the entire season. Season. And I think they were one of the top teams in terms of hits allowed on their quarterback because it was like 32 or less, something around that number. This offensive line led by that monster, Quentin Nelson. I mean, this is who they are. They protect. They run block. They pass protect. This is what they do. And so when you look at it from that perspective and you look at the pieces that they have, and they were just in the playoffs, and then you look at the fact that Carson Wentz is being reunited with Frank Reich, the offensive coordinator in 2017. Last time they were together, which was 3 years ago, what did he do? They were 11-2, and Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate. I look at all of those things, and I say the Indianapolis Colts won with this because I don't expect Carson Wentz to go there and stink up the joint because he'll have a better coach. He'll be in a better situation. He'll be surrounded by better players.
Okay,
and I think as a result, he will resurrect his career to some degree anyway.
Answers. Yes or no answers. Let me ask you some questions. Is the Eagles' offensive line the Colts' offensive line?
No.
Does Frank Reich coach the Eagles?
Does he coach the Eagles? No, he coaches the Colts.
Right. So, like, that's the situation. But, right, the Eagles don't have that stuff. So even if you're right, I agree that you could take a flyer on Carson Wentz if you're the Colts because you do have the, like, if Carson Wentz can't make it work in Indianapolis, he can't make it work. But they have a reclamation project on their hands. They have a coach who believes he knows how to do it because he's worked with him before when he was very good. As you mentioned, they have an offensive line anchored by one of the best guards on the offensive line I've ever seen in Quentin Nelson. There's like a force field around him when he plays. No one can come within 10 yards of him, apparently, is the rule. Like, he is unbelievable, and that line is very good. You mentioned the running game. You mentioned a lot of stuff. The Eagles don't have those things. The Eagles don't have them, so Carson Wentz doesn't work there. He may not work in Indianapolis, but as you point out, they have a shot. But he doesn't work in Philly. So what did the Eagles wind up getting for a guy who simply doesn't work there? And by the way, divided the locker room. You know, was talking to the press, or certainly whether or not he was leaking. I find it hard to believe he wasn't. When it would come out, Carson Wentz will demand a trade. He has no interest in being a backup. He'll want to trade if he's a backup to Hurts the day that Hurts is starting for the first time in the NFL. That kind of undermining influence in the locker room, in addition to a situation that doesn't work given the team, means the Eagles got to get rid of him. They got to get out from under that deal, right? So the fact that they were able to do it is one thing. The fact that if it works for the Colts, as you suggest it could, or that maybe even that is likely, the Eagles are going to get a third and a first? Oh, my God. I thought they were going to have to give up stuff to move that contract.
Why would they get a first? Why would they get a first?
Because it's a conditional second. The condition is, remember when we were joking about this yesterday, what are the conditions? The condition is, I think, 70 or 75% of the snaps. In other words, if Carson Wentz stays healthy and keeps the starting job, that second turns into a first. Mm-hmm. And even if it doesn't, a third and a second. So, Stephen A., even if they don't draft a quarterback, if they say, let's give Hurts a look for a year without a quarterback competition, maybe we'll just bring in a veteran starter to compete with Jalen Hurts, they still have draft capital to draft a quarterback next year if they want.
Yeah. But what you're doing is making the case that the Eagles are justified in letting go of Carson Wentz. Nobody's disagreeing with that. But when the question is being asked, are the Eagles losers in a Wentz trade, I'm comparing them to the benefit that the Colts get from it. And if the Colts get a starting quarterback who shines and leads them to the playoffs and potentially Super Bowl contention because they're one of the top teams in the AFC, then I consider that a win. Even though the Eagles were absolutely right in getting rid of Wentz because they don't have the personnel that the Indianapolis Colts have, it still doesn't negate the fact that the Colts ended up better off because they're going to be a better team. They're going to look better. They're going to be in the postseason, and they're going to have a quarterback who's aged 28 and moving forward because they got the right coach in place to coach him and the right organization led by Chris Ballard to oversee him. I think that's where you're answering the question.
Yep, you're betting on Wentz, and that's possible.
I'm betting on the Colts. I'm betting on the Colts.
Well, except that Wentz really does have, like, Reich and DiFilippo reportedly thought they needed to build him back up from the ground up.
Yeah.
So if they can
Doesn't
do
mean
that,
they're better off than the Colts.
If they
Not
can't, they're better
Colts.
off with Phillip Rivers.
There's an important note. There's an important note I want to mention before we close out here. The Eagles are now on the hook for $33 million. That's the biggest dead cap hit after trading a quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah.
I will leave you with that. We'll discuss this a little bit later. Ryan Clark will join us. Wentz will no longer be in Philly. Max spending all the cash. So do the Eagles have the worst QB situation in the NFC East? We'll look at it. Plus, Giannis and the Bucks, they've been riding the struggle bus. How bad is it in Milwaukee? Max and Stephen A. answered that. Meanwhile, many looked to Philly with a side eye when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round last year after breaking the bank to pay Carson Wentz. Now it might not seem so foolish. On that note, we bring in Super Bowl champ Ryan Clark. RC, top of the morning to you. You know the drill.
What's up,
We'll get
Molly?
to you last, after the fellas. Hey, happy Friday to you. Hope you have a wonderful weekend here. Max, you're up. This is your specialty. Do the Eagles have the worst quarterback situation in the NFCs? Because there's a lot of fluidity there in that division.
Not anymore. I mean, if Carson Wentz was still on the team, yeah, because for some reason they were attached to this guy. Maybe it was that awful contract. But he was undermining Jalen Hurts day of starts. He was fracturing the locker room. He was the worst starting quarterback in football all of last year until he was so bad he was no longer a starter. That's what happens to the last guy. He's a backup and causing a problem, but they're out of that now. And we'll see what we have with Jalen Hurts and whether they draft someone or sign someone, bring in someone to compete. We'll see, but I don't think you can call it the worst anymore. We know that if Dak Prescott's back with the Cowboys, that's the best. But you can't say the Eagles are worse off than Washington or the New York Football Giants. Washington, as of right now, their starter's going to be Heineke, who they signed to a backup contract. You know why? He's a backup quarterback, level guy. They're hoping he could maybe be more if they don't find someone better. And the Giants are a congenitally conservative organization who drafted a quarterback, but almost everyone considered it a reach at 6th overall in Daniel Jones, who showed some promise as a rookie. Was 18th in QBR as a rookie. Hey, if he can figure out his turnover problem and get a little better in certain areas, but he regressed, if anything, in his second year. Certainly he didn't get better. He's 20th overall in QBR. And generally, things were down. His completion percentage barely nudged up. Far fewer touchdowns, more interceptions, a much worse touchdown interception ratio, and generally just didn't show. You know, year 2 is supposed to be the development year. He certainly did not show that. And yet the Giants, if you ask around the league, they ain't planning on moving on from Daniel Jones. That's their guy. So the fact that they are that way and they're kind of reflexively conservative about this, we're going to stick with Daniel Jones. Think of how long it took him to get rid of Eli after it was clear that he was cooked. Means the Giants could have a worse quarterback situation if Jones continues to do what he's doing, which is not show growth. Washington could also have a worse quarterback situation. I don't look at Heineke or Jones and say, those guys are going to be better than Hurts. I don't know, but I do know that Philadelphia is out of the woods with the Carson Wentz situation, and that automatically means that they don't automatically have the worst QB situation in the NFC East.
I think they do. First of all, they only got one quarterback, and it's a guy that only completed 52% of his passes. I like Jalen Hurts. I like the potential, but we don't know if he's ready yet. That's number one. Number two, I mean, we don't know about their coach and what he's going to bring to the table as well. Doug Peterson is no longer there, and they've got a rookie head coach, so we'll see what he does. Number three, I look at a situation when I think about the rest of the NFC. I like Taylor Heineke. I mean, I know I only saw him one game, but you throw for 306 yards in a playoff game against Tampa's defense, led by Todd Bowles and those boys. I'm going to have respect for you, and I'm not going to be a prisoner of the moment per se, but I did see potential. I did see moxie, and as far as I'm concerned, if you're dealing with tougher circumstances, although people get back and they watch film and they study you a little bit better and you don't catch them by surprise, that still was a tough situation for him to be in and for him to show up and play the way that he played, albeit for one game. Hell, that was more than Dwayne Haskins did in 2 years in the nation's capital. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. I'm also looking at the return of Alex Smith potentially, and I'm saying, excuse me, you've got some veteran leadership and you've got stability there with Ron Rivera as your coach. Dallas is Dallas, we understand that, but Dak Prescott is expected to come back, and Andy Dalton was a starter in the NFL for years in Cincinnati before he ended up in Dallas. So that's not a god-awful situation if they fix some of the parts around them. You look at the New York Giants with Daniel Jones, not impressed. I get all of that. But Saquon Barkley wasn't there. You know, what receivers did you have? I mean, and even though we were looking at Joe Judge, we saw a lot of promise. We saw a level of stability. We saw them improving each and every single game. We saw him suffering through some injuries, so there was some inconsistency here. He was in and he was out, etc. I think the jury is still out on Daniel Jones. All I'm trying to say is that Jalen Hurts can end up proving all of us wrong, and I hope that he is. I'm rooting for the brother. But at this particular moment in time, with the $33 million in dead cap space for the Philadelphia Eagles, with the exit of Carson Wentz and having only Jalen Hurts to rely upon and having a new coach in tow, in play there and what have you. I'm just looking at it and saying it's a tough situation for anybody to deal with, let alone a quarterback in just his second year in the National Football League. I think at this particular moment in time, it is plausible to look at the Philadelphia Eagles and say they have the worst quarterback situation of anybody in the NFC East.
No, they do not. Because sometimes you need people to leave you, Stephen A. There are times we are tied to people and those people keep dragging us down. Those people are anchors that are sinking our ships. And that's what Carson Wentz was. And so now, yeah, it's only one dude in the room. It's a better dude than they had before Carson Wentz left. And now you do have an opportunity, if you're Sirianni, to say, okay, I'm going to evaluate Jalen Hurts, who I believe is a good NFL starter. I don't think he's a great NFL starter, but I believe he's a good NFL starter. I believe he is better than Taylor Heineke. I believe that he is better than Daniel Jones. And so if you have that situation, you say we can go out and add some veteran backup leadership in this locker room and add a veteran to the quarterback room. And if we look in the draft and say Trey Lance falls to us and we just absolutely love him, or Justin Fields and we just absolutely love him, then you take him. If not, you take a player at 6 that makes this team better and you move forward with Jalen Hurts. You're speaking about Taylor Heineke and what he did against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in one game before there was film on him. It was impressive, right? He played hard. There was moxie. But think about the first 2.5 games for Jalen Hurts. That was playing the New Orleans Saints, who had an excellent defense. You go to Arizona and you go toe-to-toe with Kyler Murray. And for the first half of the Dallas Cowboy games, he played extremely well. And so I think right now the Philadelphia Eagles are in a better position from just their quarterback room, from the guy they have right now that's going to start, than 2 of the other teams in the division. Obviously, if Dak Prescott's the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, they are in the best position. But for the Philadelphia Eagles to be rid of Carson Wentz, to not have that particular quarterback controversy or that particular quarterback competition, that puts the Philadelphia Eagles in a better place as far as the locker room is concerned. And I believe that Jalen Hurts is a good enough starter to put you ahead of the Washington football team and the New York Giants.
Well, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not saying that Carson Wentz's exit is a bad thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not saying they're worse off. I'm just saying, to answer the question directly, if you compare the Eagles situation to everybody else within the division, I think at this particular moment in time, the Eagles still have the worst situation. We'll see whether or not I'm wrong as the season, once next season rolls around.
Look, Jalen Hurts did things, let's not forget, and it's not just catching teams unawares. He did things like, what was it? He had the game with 300 passing yards, like 60-something rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Just remember how the offense looked when he took over, even when they weren't winning because it wasn't a good team. The offense looked so much better when he was under center versus Carson Wentz. And it was the same offensive line. It was the same thing. Well, because he was moving around. Carson Wentz can move around. No, Jalen Hurts is willing to run the coach's offense. Jalen Hurts, if you look at him in between, Jalen Hurts makes a mistake, he's not out there sulking or pouting. He's looking to get better. He's a promising young player. We don't know what he is, but if you want to take him and Daniel Jones, was a much longer track record in the NFL that suggests maybe there's limited upside there, and he's a bottom 3rd type starting quarterback right now. And Heineke, I don't think you can say the Eagles are worse off. And to really take it further, Stephen A., the Giants aren't looking at quarterback. That's the problem. The Eagles have Hurts, but they're still looking. So there's an active chance to get better. Whereas the Giants are sitting back saying, this is our dude.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece is this. When you talk about Jalen Hurts compared to Carson Wentz, if we're going to, kind of end this and see who Jalen Hurts was, they averaged 5.73 yards a play with Hurts, 4.7 with Carson Wentz. Now, if you take that equivalent, that's about the New Orleans Saints offense compared to the New York Jets offense, with the difference in quarterbacks. That's the difference that Jalen Hurts made at quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles last year, who we knew were beat up on the offensive line, had injuries in the backfield, and also weren't great at the skill position. The dude is a good NFL starter, so you at least have that as a starting point as you're looking to add to the quarterback room.
Mm-hmm. All right, RC, I'm being told that you're a one-hit wonder today because you got places to be. But I like the look for a Friday. You're ready to go straight from television to happy hour. I tried to pull out the same thing. I appreciate you. We will talk to you next week. Listen, me and RC are a little loud today, but we can handle it. We can pull it off. Yeah. NBA, the reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the Bucks have been struggling. Last night, losing their 5th straight at home to the Raptors. Giannis, what's the deal?
I'm not frustrated. It's part of it. We're learning. We're trying to get better. I like facing adversity. I like being down, being knocked down, because that's the only way you improve.
Something very likable about Giannis' whole energy. Stephen A., what's wrong with the Bucks?
Well, right now, their defense is ranked like 20th in the National Basketball Association. We're not accustomed to seeing a Mike Budenholzer team struggle defensively. And clearly, injury to Drew Holiday doesn't help matters because obviously he's an elite defender in this game. We understand that. The flip side to it is that if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you opened your mouth and messed up, and as a result, nixed the deal that would have landed you Bogdanovich, and that was a huge, huge loss for them because if he were on this team with Drew Holiday, I think we'd be speaking a little bit differently about Milwaukee right now, but he's not. You still have Drew Holiday, you've got Giannis, you've got Chris Middleton, and the rest of the crew, and you've lost 5 straight, you're middle of the pack, and I think that and I don't expect that things will continue to go this way, Max. I'm not trying to say that, nor am I trying to endorse what I'm about to acknowledge, and that is this. I think Mike Budenholzer, the coach, could be in trouble. At some point in time, here's the reality of the situation. Mike Budenholzer, coach of the year in Atlanta, coach of the year in Milwaukee. I think he's an exceptional coach personally. He clearly knows what he's doing. But in the end, come postseason time, what do you have to show for it? And at the end of the day, when you've got Giannis Antetokounmpo and you just signed him to this exorbitant deal, and you've got Chris Middleton in tow, and you've got Drew Holiday in tow, and what have you, there are expectations. You went to the Eastern Conference Finals against Toronto a couple of years ago. You were up 2-0. Wet the bed, lost 4 straight. Last year in the bubble, you got blitzed by a Miami squad in 5 games. Now you're struggling again. At some point in time, people are going to look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, and they're going to sit up there and say, you got the Greek freak here. What the hell are you going to do with it? We're not just interested in getting to the regular season and going home. We want to really, really make a championship push, and questions are going to be asked whether or not Mike Budenholzer is that guy. I want to emphasize, I'm not one of those people. I believe in the man. I like him a lot. I think he's an exceptional coach, etc. But you do have a bunch of people clamoring for opportunities to coach a talent like Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's the world of professional sports. And when you've had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to get it done, and not only do you come up short, but you seem to be regressing. You lose in the conference finals one year. You lose in the semifinals the next. Now you're sitting there and we're talking about Brooklyn and Philadelphia, and we're not even talking about you. If that trend continues, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you spent all the money you can spend. Now it gets to a point where we got to look in another direction because we're supposed to have the personnel that's suited for better than this. And that means you're going to look at the direction of the coach.
I want to talk about Budenholzer because in Atlanta they won 60 games, but Stephen A., they didn't have a superstar on that team. So they flamed out in the playoffs, probably worse than they ought to have flamed out, but we understand playoffs.
They got swept by LeBron. And it's
superstar time. You don't have a guy like that, but he has a guy like that in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really have a second banana good enough. I keep saying the dominant big needs a guy who's not a big, who's just as good as him. Shaq needed Kobe and a prime D. Wade. Even Penny wasn't good enough. Kareem needed Oscar Robertson and Magic Johnson. Got no championships without them. Giannis needs a guy like that. I don't know if Drew Holiday is that kind of player, but he's an excellent player, and the losing streak coincides with his absence because of COVID protocol, right? So that's the short answer. Drew Holiday is not there. But I want to talk about Budenholzer because I think what you're talking about is what we're seeing from the Bucks right now. Budenholzer's doing something that requires real intestinal fortitude here. He's heard, I'm sure, what people are saying, and not only that, he sees what they're saying is correct. If you can win 60-plus games in the regular season, why are you getting bounced out? Even if you don't win the championship, before you ought to get bounced out in the playoffs, because the playoffs are different. And what he's decided is, look, we can't play offense and defense the same way we've been doing it. It doesn't work given the personnel we have, not to the tune of a championship or even getting to a championship, getting to the finals. So what is he doing? He's making changes, using the regular season to experiment, to see if he can make those changes. On offense, Giannis is not initiating everything. So that takes some getting used to, particularly when Drew Holiday is not there. On defense, they're trying to learn how to switch. They're not funneling everything to Giannis and Brook Lopez, and that takes time to learn. If you watch the Bucks, you see a lack of urgency in terms of the way they play. And I was thinking about this a lot. Like, of all the teams who should be playing with urgency, this team has flamed out in the playoffs a couple years in a row now. Why? And it's not exactly a lack of urgency. It's that they're in a learning phase. They're in an experimental learning phase on both sides of the ball, on offense and on defense. They're trying to figure out, can we be effective switching, not funneling everything to our bigs? And can we run a championship caliber offense when Giannis isn't the guy doing all of the initiating on offense? So all the stuff that comes easy to them, quickly to them, that's muscle memory to them because they've been doing it, that's not there as much. And what's there in place is, hey, let's try this, let's try that, let's see what works. I think that's what's happening. Budenholzer's doing what you're saying. He's trying to figure it out in the playoffs. He's using the regular season to do it.
Well, I appreciate your explanation. My response is no one's going to give a damn when all is said and done. This is a man that is a two-time coach of the year. He was one coach of the year in 2014, 2015, winning 60 games in Atlanta. 2018, 2019, he won 60 games in Milwaukee. He's won 71% of his games in Milwaukee over the last 3 years. He's won 58% of his games in his career. He's taken his team to the playoffs 6 times in 8 years. All of those things are recognized as after serving for 2 decades as an assistant to the great Greg Popovich. We know that Mike Budenholzer can coach. We understand that he's an exceptional coach, and I think Milwaukee knows that, and Milwaukee's happy to have him. I'm just saying that when you're a small market team, at least to some degree, and you went out and you've spent this money on a superstar talent like Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you've put pieces around him that you believe should have you in title contention, if you continue to come up short, and you're going in the wrong direction, meaning that you're going to the conference finals 1 year and then you don't make it the next couple of years, etc. Somebody's going to look at the coach because they have no choice.
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere else to look.
And
after that, he's trying to do something about it, but it better work, Max. That's what I'm saying. It better work.
So what's really wrong with Giannis and the Bucks is they don't have Bradley Beal on that team. They did as well as they thought they could do. They didn't get Chris Paul. They got Drew Holiday.
Hold on.
Who's a very good player. But
I told you that before. You didn't want to listen. I told you that before. You didn't want to listen. You was calling Giannis the best player in the world, and then he went from 3 to number 5 in 4, or number 1 to number 5 in 4 days. I told you the brother needed another shooter. You didn't want to listen.
Everyone
you said he's enough.
And I said needs someone else as good as them if they're a big.
You didn't want to listen.
Winning 5 straight by double digits to losing 5 straight. All right. All I know is Doc Rivers and the Sixers are doing their thing. Kyrie Irving talked that talk and walked that walk. Harden as well. So should the Nets be titled?
Double got to go. What a play. Kyrie Irving rattles one home. Harden with the 3. Oh, LeBron. Who in their right mind is going to get in front of that? Harris, tough shot. Got it.
I think he's showing why he's one of the best shooters that we have on display.
The Nets win their 5th consecutive game.
Stella isn't the only one who got her groove back, guys. The Nets in action last night, taking down the Lakers, winners of 5 straight. Stephen A. Smith, should they be the favorites to win it all?
I definitely believe that now more than ever, particularly with the questionable health of Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis was 100%, perhaps I would feel different, but he's not, and I don't think he's going to be for the rest of the year. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the Brooklyn Nets, and I'm saying, like per 100 possessions, they averaging like 124 points. They're giving up about 114 over the last 5 games or so. Got a net rating that's second in the league to only the Utah Jazz, who've won 19 of their last 20 games. The Brooklyn Nets have been absolutely sensational as far as I'm concerned. James Harden is deserving of MVP consideration. How selfless he's been, how the quintessential point guard that you're supposed to be. You weren't anticipating he would be that way, but he is. Kyrie has been sensational. He's box office, and he does what he wants on the offensive end of the floor, and he has amped up his defense as well, and he's held other guys accountable to try and do so themselves. This is what Kevin Durant out the last 3 games due to that hamstring strain. And then you've got Joe Harris, you've got Jeff Green, you got TLC. You're just looking on and on and on. DeAndre Jordan, we can't ignore what he's bringing to the table. There's nobody in the NBA that can stop them offensively if they give you anything defensively. And I told you this, Max. I told you this a couple of weeks ago. I said, at the time, they were ranked like 27th or 28th Over the last 5 games, I think their defense has been like 18th. Again, they're not awesome and all of this other stuff, but they've improved significantly enough for you to look at them and pay attention. And the fact that they can go 9-10 deep and don't miss a beat offensively, if they give you anything defensively, I mean, if they were 20th defensively, that's good enough. They're that potent offensively. And I think when you look at the Eastern Conference, I don't think there's anybody that can mess with them. And even though you can look at Utah, Denver, of course, the Clippers, and a healthy Lakers squad. Again, the healthy Lakers squad would be my caveat. If Anthony Davis were 100%, I probably would not say this, but he is not. I do not believe he will be for the rest of this season. It sounds too similar to what Kevin Durant went through before he went down to that NBA Finals game and tore his Achilles. It sounds too similar to me. I don't like it. And as a result, I'm going with the Brooklyn Nets. I think the Brooklyn Nets should be the favorites to win it all, to win the chip.
Well, I'm assuming health for Anthony Davis. I mean, they're going to give him a nice long rest. Don't forget, when KD was in the finals, he came right back and played on that so-called calf injury.
He was gone about 2 series.
Okay, but you and I were on the road doing the show from the Bay Area, and what did I say? Like, don't play in this game. This is obviously an Achilles. No, the team doctor says, of course it was. It was right. You know, the calf bone's connected to the Achilles bone, apparently, because of course that's what happened. Different for AD. AD has a nice long time to rest up. Now, assuming that AD is healthy, the Lakers are the team to beat. They're the defending champions. No one really extended them. The Heat took 2 games from them. That was extending them. But before that, they gentlemen swept the Western Conference, including a Denver team that not only gave the Clippers all they could handle, but beat the Clippers. Lakers lost 1 game to them. They lost 1 game in each series up to the finals, and they still didn't get taken 7 games. Now, it's one thing if you say, yeah, but they lost this piece. They improved. Lakers improved since last year's team. And the thing about it is, they're the one team, the Lakers, when healthy. Stephen A., if they don't have AD, don't bother showing up because they might not get to the finals. Probably they won't get to the finals without AD, let alone beat whoever's there out of the East. But assuming AD is there, this Lakers team is the only team in the league that is absolutely elite, both ends of the floor, offense and defense. Remember, no team has won a championship in the last 2 decades, 20 years, with a defense ranked lower than 11th. Now, do I agree with you that the Nets could be the first team to do that with a mid-ranked kind of defense? Yep, they have that much offensive firepower. I've consistently said this is going to be the best offensive team of all time by the end of this season. But they're going to have to play defense. So because they haven't really done that consistently yet, I can't make them the favorites when the Lakers are the champions defending and have improved, presuming health for AD. I'll tell you something else. The Sixers are a real threat because not only have they been playing well this season, but they are designed, health permitting again. Who's going to stop Embiid on that Nets team? Like, that is a bad matchup. He is going to get his. And the Sixers can also shoot, and they can play defense. All things considered, do I like the Nets to beat them? Yeah, I do. I think the Nets will play good enough defense. But that's a tough series. It's not a given.
I'm not saying it's not a tough series, but threes will beat 2s any day of the week. And I think that when you consider the marksmen that the Nets can put on the floor all at the same time, I think that spells trouble for the Philadelphia 76ers, particularly with Ben Simmons refusing to be a perimeter threat. That's number one. I think that you have to look at it from the standpoint that the Philadelphia 76ers have tailed off a little bit defensively over the last few games. If you're paying attention to them, we've got to pay attention to that and keep our eyes on that. I think Seth Curry should be shooting the ball more, not less, but that hasn't been the case as of late. That's something to point to. And then I also think about this again. You talk about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant had strained his calf back in, 2019? I think it was like May 8th. Mm-hmm. May 8th. And he came back June 10th, Mac. That was a month and 2 days. Now, obviously, he could have sat out longer, and we get all of that, and we can assume that Anthony Davis probably will need to sit out longer as well. But my attitude is that if you're holding your Achilles, if you're holding your calf area, and it's tinkering with your Achilles, then you know what? It's dicey, man. And even if you come back, I have to imagine that you're not going to be 100%. You're going to be very, very concerned about that as well. And the Brooklyn Nets ain't a team that you want to go through having those kind of issues going on, considering what they bring to the table offensively. So I just look at it and I just say right now, because Anthony Davis, I think that his health situation is highly questionable. I think that the Brooklyn Nets are legitimate favorites to win the championship, to win the title, because they ain't going downhill once Kevin Durant comes back. Kevin Durant is a plus on every level. He ain't a minus.
Obviously. Yeah. Well, we'll see what Kawhi and the Clippers have to say about that, because it's going to be a fun one. Sunday, ESPN, 8 o'clock, Nets at Clippers. Fellas, we will leave it there. We got some NFL. LeBron James, Kevin Durant will serve as team captains for the All-Star game and draft the rosters from the pool of players voted as starters and reserves in each conference. Here's a look at who was voted as starters. Luka, Steph, the Joker, Kawhi, Kyrie, Bradley Beal, Giannis, and Joel Embiid. Noticeably missing Dame Lillard. Stephen A., is Lillard underappreciated?
I don't think there's any question that he's underappreciated, because when we talk about players, we don't just talk about numbers. We talk about when they deliver those numbers. That's the key that got lost. It gets lost here in the shuffle. If you look at Steph Curry's numbers, for example, they're a little bit better than Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is averaging nearly 29.7 points a game, 7.7 assists, I think like 5 rebounds or whatever. Steph Curry's averaging 30. All right, with 6.5 assists. He's shooting better from the field. Of course, he's shooting better from three-point range because he's the best shooter ever known to man. This is who Steph Curry is, and we understand that. So I would side with my man White Mike Wilbon when he says instead of one of them starting in the backcourt, why not both of them? You know what? I look at it and I say to myself, excuse me, I don't think a guy like a Luka Doncic needs to be starting ahead of a Damian Lillard or anything like that. But here's the thing that I really, really want to get into. Damian Lillard is a closer. You remember that movie Glenn Ross with Alec Baldwin, Max, when he stole the show in the first 10 minutes of the movie? Always be closing.
ABC.
That is what Damian Lillard does. The Chicago Bulls know it. The New Orleans Pelicans know it. Everybody, Golden State Warriors know it. Everybody knows it, okay? I mean, Paul George, and when he was with Oklahoma City, they knew it. Patrick Beverly, when he was in Houston, they know it. They said since 2012, nobody has hit more game-winning shots, more clutch shots. Not even Steph Curry. Nobody. Not LeBron James, not Steph Curry, not James Harden. Nobody has hit more clutch shots, more game-winning shots than Damian Lillard. And by the way, the brother signed his 6-year extension for $250 million. Largest contract in NBA history. And nobody blinked. You know why? Because we know why. It's because of this right here. It's because it's Dame time. That's what I'm talking about here. When you sit up there and think about it, even with Steph Curry, think about this. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter God ever created, as far as I'm concerned. And still, nobody strikes more fear in your heart with the ball in their hands.
That's right.
And the game on the line.
That's right.
Than Damian
That's why
Lillard.
He's not underappreciated, Stephen A. You just said it. No one even, he signed for $250 million. No one blinked. He is among the most respected superstars in American team sports. By the way, he got the $250 million contract. He's got commercials. Everyone knows it's Dame time. He can rhyme. He is widely respected, practically revered by the national press. Everyone loves Damian Lillard. He is the example of what you want from a franchise player. That's not being underappreciated. Now, should he have been starting on this All-Star team? Yep, he should have been starting. Over Doncic. Should have been him and Steph Curry in the backcourt. Barely over Doncic.
I agree.
Barely, but over Doncic. Does that mean that Doncic is more appreciated? Maybe. But Doncic is, global. Damian Lillard plays in an inaccessible market where the games are on very late for a team that usually doesn't make deep playoff runs. He's also 6'2" and 30 years old. So when you look at Damian Lillard, also, by the way, he just got to this level last couple seasons. Before that, he was still great. But Lillard, because he is so ambitious and wants to be great, is constantly getting better. So The last 2 years, he's been playing like an MVP conversation level. Steph's been doing that for 6 or 7. Luka's been doing that for 2 years too, but he's not 6'2" and 30. He's 6'8" and he's 21 years old. And he plays in Dallas, a much bigger media market, whose games aren't on quite as late as the games are on in Portland. And so for those reasons, he gets more attention, even though the way Lillard's playing, even that's changing. For example, I think most people would agree with you and me, that Lillard really should be starting in this game. Does that mean he's underappreciated? I don't think so. I think people appreciate he's an MVP caliber player who just got there the last couple of years, went from an All-Star plus, the 4.5 guy to a 5.0 guy in the last couple of years. I think people appreciate he's been carrying a team racked with injuries, but he hasn't played on great teams. We haven't seen him make deep playoff runs. He doesn't play in L.A. or New York or Dallas or Miami or a place like that.
But it's never been the case, Max.
What
and
has?
The fact of the matter is Luka Doncic is already starting. He's got a worse record. They haven't made any deep playoff runs either. He's young, of course. He just got here a couple of years ago. We understand that. But in the end, the point is he's been doing what he's been doing over a sustained period of time. When we were talking about the MVP, his name didn't even come up until we brought it up the other day.
Well,
we brought it up the other day. Didn't even come up.
But Lillard
That's the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Well, don't forget, what I mean is he keeps giving better and better evidence that he's there, like 43 and 16 the other night.
The fact that it's required matters.
No, but he was top 10 in everyone's list. Now
I'm saying,
maybe he's
they don't
top
talk
5
about
because
him,
he keeps
Max.
getting better.
When we talk about the word appreciation, we're not talking about numbers. We understand. Everybody knows the numbers. I'm talking about, when you talk about appreciation, somebody in the mind's eye, they automatically come to your mind when you're talking about them because of what you've done over a sustained period of time, a sustained level of listen, the players voted him. The media voted for him. The fans don't, okay? So you basically have a tie. The tie basically, according to a lot of folks in the NBA, should go to the guy with a better record in the conference, et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't applicable here. Better record than Golden State. Better record than Dallas. I'm just saying you got to look at what the guy does.
I agree. And for that reason,
CJ McCollum, no Nurkic.
Though it's very close, I would take Lillard over Doncic this year to start.
I agree.
But it is very close. And the reason generally Doncic has gotten more press over the last couple of years, I wouldn't say much more press. Again, Lillard's a guy with commercials who we actually do talk about Dame time. Everyone knows it.
We don't talk about him,
But the reason is because Doncic showed up in the league, 20 years old, giving people practically a triple-double with 30 points.
I guess you've been sitting here on First Take without me because the fact of the matter is that we barely brought him up and nobody else brought him up until we brought him up. They don't talk about him enough. He's been doing it for years. They don't talk about him enough.
He's been doing it at this level for 2 years.
I'm on the show by myself. I mean, I missed those shows. When the hell we talk about them?
We argued last year, Steph or
we
Dame.
Just brought it up.
We had different.
Because I brought it up the other day. We don't talk about it.
Last year we argued Steph or Dame. Steph Curry.
Okay. All right. We do
Stephen A.
240
just wants
shows
a little more
year,
Dame
Max.
time in everyone's life.
You know what the hell I'm saying?
Lillard
Stop acting
leads
like
the
you don't know
NBA in clutch time points and clutch time shooting percentage. It should be called Dame time, not clutch time. Let's leave it there,
No
fellas.
doubt.
We got more to debate coming up on First Take. Kyrie, talking the talk, walking the walk. Harden 2. Should the Nets be favored to win the finals? Big Perk, where you at? He'll be with us in just a bit. You have a fabulous weekend down there. The big news came down yesterday. Adam Schefter, Chris Mortensen reporting that the Eagles have traded Carson Wentz to the Colts for a third-round draft pick and a second-round pick in 2022. That could turn into a first round if Wentz plays at least 75% of the Colts' offensive snaps. The trade will not be officially processed until the new NFL year beginning on March 17th. On that note, we bring in our friend, two-time Super Bowl champ, Rob Ninkovich. Rob, we'll get to you in just a minute, but we're going to start with Mr. Kellerman because we know this is his pet topic here. Are the Eagles the losers, Max, in the Wentz trade?
No, I don't know why anyone would think they are. Carson Wentz had what I thought was an immovable contract. The guy was paid like a top 5 player in the league, and those guys, by the way, in his 5th season, not a second-year player, who, by the way, was once at MVP caliber. It was a long time ago, sliding, till he was the dead last worst starting quarterback in football in 2020, to the point where, you know what happens to the worst starter? They're not a starter anymore. He was yanked. He wasn't a starter anymore. So a top 5 paid, supposed to be elite quarterback who's the dead last worst starter and then not even a starter has a huge contract. How are you going to get rid of him? Well, because he's a good locker room guy. No, he wasn't. He was leaking to the press, or at least it was being leaked to the press the day Jalen Hurts made his first start as a pro for the Eagles. If Carson Wentz, he has no interest in being a backup. If he's not starting, he wants a trade. Really, Sherlock? Carson Wentz doesn't want to be a backup. Who does? Who's a starter? Of course not. But other guys take their benching like leaders and support the other guy and wait until the time is right when they get the ball and perform and lead. That's not what Carson Wentz did. He sowed division in the team. He created a problem. So that guy, who's going to be a problem potentially in the locker room, who just undermined his team after underperforming every starter in the league, that guy, you're going to get rid of that contract? Not only did they get rid of the contract, they got a 3rd rounder this year. Okay, that's not a great return for a starting quarterback or a guy they want to start, but also a conditional 2nd round pick next year could become a 1st. So in this draft, they have 4 picks in the top 100. By the way, who knows how low Justin Fields will drop, and they don't have to drop that low for the Eagles to grab him. Or they could just take some really good players with those picks, surround Jalen Hurts, and if it doesn't work out, if they don't like what they see, they bring in a veteran to compete against him, then next year they're going to have a lot of draft capital too. They can draft a quarterback next year. The Eagles lost? No, they got out of this looking clean.
Even if they got out of it looking clean, when you're trying to decipher who's a winner or loser, it's in comparison to somebody. You can't have a loser without having a winner. So if you want to just compartmentalize and focus on the Philadelphia Eagles, then we can listen to your diatribe and say nothing. But the fact of the matter is there's somebody that got Wentz. Who got Wentz? What kind of situation is he walking into? That's going to define whether it's a winner or loser. Of course, the Eagles are better off without Carson Wentz. We understand that. But in terms of deciphering who's a loser in all of this, as it pertains to the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm thinking about the team that got Carson Wentz, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. An Indianapolis Colts team with an elite defensive line that even with a down year because of injuries was still ranked 7th according to Pro Football Focus. A team that took a guy in Carson Wentz that was sacked 50 times last year in Philadelphia. They protected Phillip Rivers. He only got sacked 19 times. Okay? He only got touched a little bit, like 31 or 32 times. I'm thinking about Jonathan Taylor being able to run the football. Even though Miles Sanders and Boston Scott could run the football, Doug Peterson wasn't calling running plays for them, at least to the degree and frequency that we would like. I'm thinking about, even though T.Y. Hilton is going to be a free agent once next month rolls around, you look at Pittman and Pascal and some of those guys, and they've got some talent at the wideout spot. You got Frank Reich, who was your offensive coordinator when you were 11-2. And relevant as an MVP candidate in 2017. Now as your head coach, which is why the Colts made the offer, because Frank Reich said, this dude is not as bad as people think. He's not as bad as he looked last year. I know him. I coached him. Bring him here. Let me have him. And so you got to look at those things and look at the personnel. A top 10 defense, a top 10 offense, fresh off an appearance in the postseason. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, where you lost to the Buffalo Bills 27-24, it was a close game. I'm looking at the Indianapolis Colts getting a guy like Carson Wentz, who's only 28 years of age. If he can be fixed, and Frank Reich is considered a quarterback fixer to some degree, I got news for you. I think it's a plus for the Indianapolis Colts. I think they win in all of this. I do.
Yeah, look, I understand both sides of this, and Max saying that the Eagles are winners. I was one saying that there's no way they're going to trade this contract. I mean, they give him $128 million, $66.5 just to sign his name. They guaranteed that, and the Eagles paid that. So the winners in this would probably be the Eagles getting rid of the contract, but the losers would be the management that drafted him high in the first round and then decided to give him that massive contract. That should have an asterisk by whoever was the one that said, yes, let's draft him, let's pay him this, and then let's trade him away and try and get rid of the guy that we thought was going to be the next franchise quarterback here. So there's winners and losers in it all. And I understand what Stephen A. is saying about the Colts, and it all depends on how Carson Wentz does. If he goes to the Colts and he's the future there, and they get back into the playoffs and win a playoff game, then it's going to look amazing. And the Eagles are going to look like the losers in this deal. But if he goes there and he doesn't do well and he looks like he did in 2020, well, the Eagles look pretty good for getting rid of him, number one, getting rid of the contract, and just saying, okay, we need to go with Hurts. We need to go with another guy here. It's not going to work. So there's both sides to this. We'll see how it plays out in 2021. But who knows? We'll see in the season and how it progresses.
Right. By the way, the Eagles made mistakes in the past. If you want to take a step back and say were the Eagles winners or losers in the whole Carson Wentz situation, you can say losers, although he did contribute to a Super Bowl win in the sense he gave him a really good record before Nick Foles took over. They'd never won a Super Bowl before. I'm sure a lot of Eagles fans wouldn't change the last couple of years and sacrifice that Super Bowl either. But, Stephen A., what you're saying...
Max, let me ask you a question, Max.
Yeah.
Max, if you had a Super Bowl... If you won the Super Bowl like Carson Wentz, would you put that ring on and say that you won that Super Bowl, or did you look at it like, man, I didn't win anything?
You're asking me personally?
I would look at it like I didn't win anything. I would look at it like I didn't win anything.
Yeah, but I understand what you mean.
Stephen A., exactly. I'm getting to the point of this. When he looks at that ring, he didn't win a Super Bowl. He helped the team who tore his ACL.
I get what you mean, but I'm saying fans wouldn't change the past in Philly if they had to wipe out the last 5 years. They would want everything to play out the way it was if that was take it or leave it, because they won a Super Bowl. And he did contribute. He gave him a very good record. But so I understand what you're saying. Overall, you could argue, boy, this is a loss for the Eagles. But we're talking about, given the present situation, what they just did, given the reality of the situation, I think they won. Stephen A., what you're arguing is here's a chance where Indianapolis could win. Frank Reich and DiFilippo, those are the only two, the Colts and the Bears, who looked at Wentz and said, we think we can fix him. But both reportedly thought it was a whole ground up or top down, if you start with his head, situation. They were going to have to rebuild him, not just tweak him. So it's not a coincidence that two guys who were on the coaching staff in the past when Wentz was at his best thought, yes, we can rebuild this guy, which is what it was going to take, right? That's one. Two, if Wentz goes there and Reich is correct and he can rebuild him, and Wentz then has success, and Wentz, who's been injury prone in his career, stays healthy, then you'll be right, Stephen A. A lot of things have to happen between now and then for you to say the Colts won, the Eagles lost. As of right now, the Eagles just moved an immovable contract off their books and got draft compensation for it. A second and a third right now could wind up being a second and a first.
Well, I'm not caught up on the draft picks. I'm thinking about the $33 million in dead cap space combined with a pick that may or may not end up being a first rounder. I think a lot of these teams overblow the value of these picks from time to time. If you can sit up there and trade a number 2 overall pick, why should we be so enamored with the fact that you got a second round pick or a third round pick? That's just how I view it. I'm not saying it's completely meaningless, but I don't overblow it to the degree that some NFL folks do personally. And I think Rob is absolutely right when you talk about the Eagles front office, but it ain't the ownership, because as you said and you pointed out on many occasions, Max, you still got to spend the money. So with Jeffrey Lurie, even though you got the $33 million in dead cap space, it's really up to the GM to maneuver his way around that. It's not like more additional dollars are coming out of the pocket of Jeffrey Lurie. It's just that the numbers that's coming out of his pocket, you got to figure out a way to do the right things with it if you're Howie Roseman. Now we get to the Carson Wentz situation, and let me tell you this, and Rob will verify this. Pretty easily he'll do so. Max Kellerman, if Carson Wentz had won the Super Bowl instead of Nick Foles, this city wouldn't have been so vicious towards him, even with a down year like this year. Make no mistake about it. He didn't win that ring, and he knows it. So when he came out and he came to the rescue last year and got them to the playoffs despite all of those injuries, it was definitely an accomplishment, but you still came up short because you didn't win the chip. The level of cachet that Carson Wentz would have had he not gotten hurt when he went 11-2 before going down with Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator and Doug Peterson as his head coach, if he had gone on to win the Super Bowl without Nick Foles ever needing to come in, it would have been a totally different mindset in Philadelphia about Carson Wentz, despite how awful last season was.
I think Philly stuck with him way too long.
Being injury prone combined with being ineffective and inefficient once you are healthy is a death knell. That's what happened.
I think Philly fans stuck with him too long, to tell you the truth, too. I was
surprised
surprised with how Carson
not.
Wentz was not good at the end of 2019.
They didn't stick with him too long. That's what I'm saying. They didn't stick with him too long.
I'm saying the narrative in 2019 that he brought them to the playoffs, he played poorly in the second half of 2019. They got lucky. He was playing the worst division ever and not performing very well. He was turning the ball over on third down in the fourth quarter
consistently. Jeffrey was out. Nelson Aguilar was out. Deshaun Jackson was out at the time.
Well, he was playing terrible teams. I'll say this. It's not just the number. If you want to take the big picture, then I agree with you guys. It's a fiasco for the Eagles. If you want to back up Stephen A., it's not just that they used the second overall pick. They used enormous draft capital to trade up to the second overall pick to take Wentz. Of course, in the big picture. And then why do you give him the contract and then draft a quarterback in the second round, turn around within the same year? It's ridiculous. Yes, but given what they were dealing with right now, they did great.
Let me get one more topic in here. All right, let me get one more thing in here while we got Rob before we got to say goodbye on a Friday. So the Eagles likely, guys, to turn to Jalen Hurts, obviously, as their quarterback. Though they also intend to bring in competition for him. Division winners Washington football team re-signed Taylor Heineke, but also seem to be looking for a QB. Danny Dimes expected to be under center for the Giants, and the Cowboys expect to get Dak Prescott back from injury next season. It's worth noting that the Eagles have the 6th pick in the draft. But Max, tell me this, do the Eagles have the worst quarterback situation in the NFC East?
No, not at all. See, the Eagles right now are taking a look at Jalen Hurts. They want to see what they have. They'll probably bring in a veteran, give him some competition. They have a whole bunch of draft capital now. If it doesn't work out in the next year or so, they'll draft another quarterback. Washington just gave Heineke a backup money. But right now, he's their starter. And the Giants reached for Daniel Jones in that draft, took him 6th overall. He showed promise early. He showed no improvement last year. If anything, maybe a touch of regression. But obviously no improvement. And year number 2 is supposed to be your development year. And the Giants are married to him because they spent that draft capital on him. They don't give no indication they're going to move on. At least the Eagles can be flexible. I wouldn't say they obviously Prescott plays for the Cowboys. They're in the driver's seat. But I wouldn't say the Eagles have the worst situation. No, not anymore. Not now that they got rid of Wentz.
Jalen Hurts, I'm wishing him nothing but the best, and he had some really, really good moments, particularly 338 yards or so that he threw against Arizona with 3 touchdowns, threw for over 300 yards in a loss to Dallas. I get all of that, but he still completed 52% of his passes. I haven't seen the level of accuracy that I would like to see from him. The jury is still out. Even though Taylor Heineke was just a playoff game, it was just one game. It was a playoff game. It was against Tampa's defense. It was against Todd Bowles, and the man threw for 306 yards. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and I think with Dwayne Haskins being gone, if Carson Wentz is a plus because he's subtracted from the Philadelphia Eagles situation, why isn't the Redskins a plus because Dwayne Haskins is subtracted from that particular situation? When I look at Daniel Jones, there was no Saquon Barkley. And I like what I see Joe Judge doing. I think that Joe Judge has proven to be a really, really good coach thus far. In his rookie year, I saw them get better every week. I like what I saw. And, of course, Dallas is going to get Dak Prescott back. So I consider the Eagles to be in the worst quarterback situation, at least for the immediate moment right now, particularly when they got a new head coach and Washington has Ron Rivera.
See, I disagree. I think that they're in an okay spot with Hurts. And we all saw what he did against the Saints. At the time, the best defense in the NFL. And he went out there and he carved them up and he made them look real silly. So I think that what we've seen in the last 5 years of how the NFL quarterback, the style of an NFL quarterback, he fits the mold. He can move. He can hurt you with his legs. He can throw. I think we've also been hyper-focused with the Eagles on the quarterback position, and they have draft capital. They have the 6th overall pick. So what do they need to do? They need to build some other key pieces on that roster. They're aging. They're getting older. They need a pass rusher, a tight end, a wide receiver. There's certain things that they need to address. A tackle, an offensive tackle. They have some things they need to look at with this draft capital that they did just get and go out there and help get some pieces that can help them win. So I think they're okay in the quarterback spot. Go get Fitzpatrick as a backup. He can help a young quarterback as well.
Yeah, and they have options. Right. They have flexibility that the Giants don't seem to want to look at, and they're certainly no worse off than Washington.
Mm-hmm. All right, Rob, thank you so much for being with us. You have a fabulous weekend, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Guys, we have a new addition to